Welcome to the Deep Leadership Podcast. Today I'm joined by Kevin McCarney. Kevin is the founder of a popular group of restaurants in California called Poquito Mas, which he has led since 1984. He's a successful entrepreneur, speaker, and now an author. He has written a new book called Big Brain, Little Brain: How to Control Which One Speaks for You, where he helps his readers become better communicators by getting control over their tone and their words. In a time where anything you text, post, or even blurt out can go viral instantly, having control over your words is critical to your success. And as we know, the best leaders are great communicators. So I'm excited to have Kevin on the show to help us become better communicators. So Kevin, welcome to the show.
John, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. I really appreciate the time.
Well, I'm honored that you're here because I'm really excited to hear about your story, but also about how we can become better communicators. Because I think with your history and your experience, you've been around a lot of people for a lot of years. So I'm really excited to hear from your tremendous experience in this.
Well, thank you. I'll give you whatever tidbits I can to help me along the way.
Well, good. So before we get started, one of the things I was reading before getting ready for this is that you had a lot of jobs before you became an entrepreneur and before you started your restaurant business. I mean, some crazy stuff. You had a paper route. You were a janitor, a switchboard operator, a busboy, a waiter, a manager. You were a doorman at the Grauman Chinese Theater. You were a tour guide at Universal Studios, and eventually you became a corporate trainer. And my question to you is, how did all these jobs earlier in your career, how did they help set the stage for you to want to become an entrepreneur?
Well, every one of them is working with people a lot. And I realized I liked working with people, but I also realized there were so many different situations that people were in. And I noticed some different things happening, patterns in which people would respond within my own large family. That, growing up with a bunch of older brothers and sisters. And then when I got to the Chinese theater, we're dealing with the public and hundreds of people a day coming from all over the world and different situations, different languages, and different ways to communicate. And then going on to Universal Studios, same thing. But the one thing I noticed is that when people were under pressure, I saw a pattern emerge. And it's when they were under pressure, and when they're traveling, they're always under pressure. They're also under the influence of being tired and hungry, and not knowing, that whole not knowing exactly what to say. So I got to really try to read them and focus on them. But I really think that I saw this pattern emerge of communication, and I realized that in the pressure of the moment, a lot of people will say the wrong thing. And that will have a ripple effect on that moment and maybe later than that. But especially at Universal Studios, I noticed the different situations. And so I started paying attention to how they were communicating with each other, because I got into management in almost every one of these positions, and I had to lead other people. So I had to teach these other people how to handle the public and how to handle people and how to handle different situations, because even it doesn't matter if I can do that, if I can't teach my team to do it, then I'm a weak leader. So I had to look for ways to teach them. And that's when I came up with the big brain, little brain concept, which is my feeling is it's the reptilian brain, as I do my research on this stuff, fighting the neocortex over the emotions of the limbic system, and it's really the three brains there, but the reptilian brain, that fight or flight brain that everybody talks about.
Yes.
Oh, it's fight or flight. And they say, yeah, okay. And then the neocortex was like, no, that's not the right thing to say. So you have these two brains fighting each other, and you want to find different tools to how to get them. You want the big brain to win. And so that's what I started doing as I started going on. I started to develop this whole system of communication, especially training other people how to communicate.
Okay. No, I like this a lot. So before we get deep into the book and deep about this, the communication side, tell everybody about Poquito Mas, those of us who are not in California right now. What do you do? How many restaurants do you have? And what kind of, you've been doing it since 1984, a long time. So tell us a little bit about the restaurant.
Thank you. I'd worked in the corporate world for about a decade and a corporate trainer. And as much as I enjoyed the paychecks, I really wanted more freedom in how I treated people and how I dealt with people. I fell in love with Mexican food when I was 17. Had my first real taco. Everything before that was the hard shell 1950s stuff. And I fell in love with Mexican food, and I just couldn't believe there was this much flavor. And so I started working in the industry, and I decided at one point I need to go out on my own, even if I don't make it, even if I fail, I have got to go out on my own because I want to manage my own. I want to create my own culture of the company because I didn't. Some of the companies I was in, I wasn't as fond of their culture. So I decided I needed to do this, and so I went. I opened up a little 600 square foot place with my only myself for the first 2 months, and then I hired my first employee, who I still have working with me today.
Wow.
And so 37 years later, we have 9 restaurants. We're not in any hurry. We do everything from scratch. We make every tortilla from scratch. We make all the sauces. We make the cheese. We don't have cows or anything, but we are doing everything from scratch, and because that's what makes it taste great.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, I'm getting hungry just listening to to you describe it right now. So,
Yeah. And
um,
again, it's a business that I'm still in. I've
yeah,
been
yeah,
doing. This is what I do.
that's incredible. That's incredible. And it's interesting because you chose a career, as you mentioned before. You had a lot of brothers and sisters. You worked in jobs where you were with the public. You had to do a lot of communication, and you went into the restaurant business, which requires you're going to be around a lot of people, whether it's the public and whether it's going to be employees and what have you. And how did this background really get you started in thinking about communications? You mentioned a little bit about observing people in at Universal Studios and seeing the way people would respond. But did you see that as you started your restaurant, you kept seeing those same themes?
Same themes, same patterns. And what I realized when I was in the corporate world, I realized that training for the corporate world is an event.
Hmm,
It's a check the box event.
it is,
Okay,
yeah.
okay, yes, we train them on this, we're good. We train them on this, we're good, we're done. And what I realize is that training is not an event. An event is just the beginning. An event is of training is planting the seeds of what you want the culture to grow into. And what I learned is, and what I try to do in our own company is nurture those seeds. Have that event training where you're teaching them something, whatever that particular skill is, and then have them help them grow into that. Remind
Hmm,
them what the culture is. Remind them what's going on, because you can't just do an event and think people got it. You can't just think, oh, I told them about that. That doesn't work in leadership.
yeah,
In leadership, this. I mean, my gosh, as a commander like that in the ship and the things, you've got so many different people doing so many different things. You got to teach them why they need to do it. And
yes,
when I got into communication, I realized I had to really help them communicate with other people. I had to help employees handle people who were angry and who were upset.
yeah,
And
yeah.
you see it a lot in the news right now. Somebody gets the wrong order at a restaurant,
Oh, yeah.
and they go ballistic.
There's
They go,
riots. I mean, they're
listen,
yeah, exactly. It's
pardon the
crazy.
expression. I'm so sorry about that. They go little brain,
They
right?
go little brain.
They
Yeah,
go
yeah,
little brain. They go
yeah.
little brain. It's like I'm looking at this and going, oh my gosh. And I feel so sorry for some of the employees there. And it's just like you have people that aren't trained to realize that they don't have to be angry or say something or if something goes wrong, yes, things are going to go wrong. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
we have to train our employees how to handle that person when they're in that state of mind. When they're in the little brain, we have to teach them not to follow, because the customers are, this is not going to sound really good for someone in my business, but the customers are not always right. And there's sometimes when the customers are absolutely wrong, but in that moment that you're dealing with them, they honestly believe they are.
Yeah,
That's what
exactly.
we have to deal with. So we
Yeah.
have to bring them back. The restaurant, the word restaurant comes from the word restore, French word to restaurar. And the story about that is a man in 1765 couldn't get into any of the food unions in Paris. So he created his own little soups and stews and put a sign in his window says, come in, you weary travelers, and my food will restore you. So when we're training our employees, we're training them, hey, physiologically, a lot of these people are coming in low blood sugar,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So they're coming in, they're practically starving by the
Yeah.
time they get to our door. So they're physiologically, there's something happening there where it's not letting them be the normal human being sometimes that they want to be. Our job is to restore them, and if a mistake is made, it doesn't matter who made the mistake.
Yeah.
Just get them what they want. And there's a couple of the stories about great employees interaction with customers in the book, but it really comes down to not letting somebody else's little brain moment decide what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Don't let that be your decision maker.
I love that. That's really neat. I was looking through the book, and in the beginning, you talk about when you were a tour guide at Universal Studios, and you talk about an epiphany you had where you had a choice on how to react to the situation you were in. And why do you think that moment was so impactful, and why did you include it in the book? Because you had to go back a number of years to pull that story and put that in the book. So why does that story stand out? And what happened? Explain what happened and what was the epiphany?
It was, thank you, because it's really the first time in my life I realized I had a choice. I grew up in a very reactionary environment. A bunch of older brothers where, number one thing is win the argument, right?
Right.
Win the argument at the dinner table.
Right.
Win the argument at the dinner table is like killing the lion. It's now you're a man. Okay, you won the argument. And so winning the argument was no problem for me. As a tour guide, I'm there, and it was a really incredibly hot day in LA, maybe 110, and buses were breaking down, trams were breaking down, everything was breaking down, nothing was happening right. Everybody was really hot and upset, and the tourist had to wait 3 hours in the sun to get on a tram. Now, as a tour guide, I'm in the air-conditioned little break room, right, waiting, and I hear the loudspeaker, Kevin, tram on the right. It's a big group from Europe. They are so pissed. And so I said, I feel like I was being fed to the lions.
Yeah.
Great. I get out there, and I'm walking down the car, and I'm talking. I try to make eye contact always with people, just trying to, start with that. And by the time I get to the front where my seat is, the tour group leader grabs my arm and says, hey, take us back to our bus. We're not going to do this. You can't do this to us. And I looked at him, I said, it's above my pay grade, sir. You're going to have to sit down because we're moving. And the driver caught right away, and he started moving, just jerked the tram a little bit. So the guy sat down, he says, fine, crosses his arms, says, fine, we will be here, but we will not have a good time. There's no way you can make us laugh. Nothing. So I'm thinking my 19-year-old snarky self who knows how to win arguments, right? I've got a microphone, 128 people on the tram, and for an hour and a half, I'm just not going to give them a great tour. I was just, that snarky 19-year-old who wants to get back at anybody who said anything wrong.
Right.
And that's definitely a little brain. So within 5 or 6 seconds, I look up, and in the front row of the second car, a family from the Midwest had gotten stuck with this group. You could tell by their T-shirts that they were from the Midwest, and they were in the same sun, beet red, and they had smiles on their face. And I looked at them and I went, oh my gosh. And I instantly decided I've got to give these people a great tour. I'm going to ignore the other 124 angry, arms crossed, brows furrowed people around them. I'm going to give these people a great tour. Just these people. Well, within 10 or 15 minutes, everybody else started coming along on the tour.
Yeah.
Except to leave the group. And what happened is, what I realized is that I was giving these people a great tour, and by ignoring the negativity, all these people were pulled into the fun. They were pulled into that fun moment.
Yeah.
And this family was having a great time. At the end, everybody from the tour group came up and thanked me. The leader did not, but everybody else did. And the family from the Midwest had waited to speak to me. And as I see everybody getting off the tram, this is one of those metaphors for you want to be careful when you're in a situation where you can get back at somebody or say something wrong.
Right.
The last row of the last car, I see one of my supervisors getting off. So this was a audited tour
Oh,
where they check
wow.
you once in a while to find out how good you are. So can you imagine the 19-year-old snarky kid, the little brain guy, had won that argument,
Right,
right?
right.
And probably lost his job. But instead, because of that family, so that the family in the Midwest says, hey, the father says, you really turned that group around because they were not happy. I said, well, I didn't. You did. You gave me permission to give a really good tour because you smiled. And I said, I was going to give a completely different tour because I was not happy with them.
Yeah.
And to this day, I can feel the mother's hand on my shoulder. And she looks at me, she says, well, we want to thank you so much for giving us that tour because this is the only time we're ever going to be in California. And because you chose to give us that tour, it just made our vacation.
Wow.
And so when she said chose, I don't know
Yeah.
what it was, but it's like a little vibration hit. And it's like I had the choice to destroy their vacation if I
Right.
had this night, or in this case, simply by the way I responded, simply by my response, simply by taking that moment and completely shifting into I want to take care of these people from being totally angry to I'm going to give these people a great tour. I honestly did not know I had that in me. And so that fascinated me. So I kept studying response and reaction, and I kept gathering these notes until, and throughout all my career, I had to understand what was happening. And obviously, it's that neocortex, the big brain versus the reptilian little brain kind of fighting for the control of the moment. And in this case, because that family was there, the big brain got to win.
Yeah. So it's interesting because as you say right there, you have a choice when those situations happen. You can go down one way or another way. I think of, when you're in the car, you're in the vehicle and someone cuts you off, right? Your small brain is going to get on the horn. You might, flash the finger. You might get all upset and start yelling. But you have a choice in that moment too on how you react to that situation. You have a choice of whether you just let it go, or do you let the little brain take control, little brain versus the big brain. So, you talk about in the book of this idea of being present, but also taking that deep breath before responding to others. Where does this idea come from, is taking that deep breath and pausing and actually having and making a choice on how you're going to respond?
Well, thank you. We've always heard, count to 10, take a deep breath, all
Right,
this other
right.
stuff. And it's really important. But when I was giving presentations, I was giving a presentation to a business group on a Monday. And I was giving them big brain, little brain. And you can see some people got it right away. And some people said, well, I'm not quick enough to get to my big brain. I can't get there right that fast. I said, okay, that's interesting. I started taking some notes and telling them what they could do. And 4 days later, I'm teaching a group that I was called in to help these people. It was a charity group that was teaching people coming out of prison culinary skills.
Oh, wow.
So that they could get a job in the restaurant business. It was a 14-week program. My part of the program, I came in, I would teach them how to handle the pressure of the moment in the kitchen when things went wrong.
Yeah.
And what was fascinating is I'm doing a presentation, I'm giving a big brain, little brain, and the same group of people got it right away. And some people said, I can't get there right away. And so I realized I had to give them someplace to go. Instead of just saying fight or flight, or saying saying, oh, it's just choose the right response. Here's the list of words, choose these instead of those. I had to give them a place to go where they could ponder, if even for a couple moments, so that they could shift. And once they realized, like in the book, we have a whole section on activators, things that activate us.
Yeah.
Things that annoy us.
Yeah.
Right. Things that really bother us. And that's so in the spectrum of triggered, I don't use the word triggered anywhere in the book. I use activated. Activated is kind of the beginning.
Yeah.
It's activated, but you haven't done or said anything yet. And so, to me, somebody talking in a movie theater, that's an activator, right?
Right.
And you point, somebody cuts you off in the car. You're in a big hurry, and the person in front of you is not making a left turn when you can see it's perfectly safe for them to do so. and you simply can't communicate with them to get it
Right.
done.
Right.
You have different things, being hungry,
Yeah.
is one of
Yeah.
the, being hungry, being tired. These are all, and I tell people there's all these activators in our life. We have to be careful because that's where little brain, that's where little brain wants to take over and say the wrong thing, snap at somebody. And it really does come down to, uh, when I was teaching these groups, I had to give them a place to go. So I developed a concept called neutral. And
Yeah.
it's getting to neutral is a place where you can pivot.
Yeah.
Just think about it, where you can pivot. It's like you can rebalance. And in the martial arts world, they have this thing called slipping the punch, where somebody's coming at you and they're throwing a punch. You stand to the side. You let their entire energy go by, so you can rebalance and shift how you're going to respond. So a lot of these things are like that, where you, if you know these things that activate, there are certain people that I know, they say, oh, that person, right? They're
Yeah.
gonna be at the
Yeah.
party, right? So if you know that's happening, you can correct it before you go in. You can challenge yourself. Just say, no, stay. Don't let little brain take over any part of this
Yeah.
conversation. Don't let it do that. Because what we do in neutral is we give people a neutral word to say, and this is
Okay.
what was the most challenging thing, because the idea of neutral is easy, but the concept of getting into when you're under pressure,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can read it. And so the under pressure is when you realize I had to give them something, a tool that they could use when they got to neutral, not just take a breath or breathe and count to 10. What are you doing counting to 10? What are you thinking about? You had to
Yeah.
give them a direction. So we give them, as you see, a list of words they can use. And a lot of people already have a neutral word, right?
Okay.
They just don't think of it as a tool, right?
Yeah.
I got home from a really long day at work. Oh, maybe 18 hours, plumbing, electrical issues, everything but the restaurant business. I'm exhausted, and I get home and I go in about 8 o'clock at night. I think, oh, I'm just going to relax. It's going to be easy. 50 kids in my house singing at the top of their lungs, right? Because my daughters were in something called show choir, and you that's when you got to be so careful. And all I did was I went, okay, what have we got going here? So, because my neutral word, the thing that I use the most, and I use a couple other ones, is okay.
Okay.
Okay, because, and you've got to do it in that pleasant tone of voice so that it makes sure that they're getting the right tone. And so instead of just, because you walk in, you go, okay, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Same
It's
exact word,
yeah.
but a completely different message. And one of the things we talk about in the book is the tone is the message.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially with people who work for you and even your children, they read your tone.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
remember your tone, because tone brings feelings.
Yeah.
And so you learn, as kids, I think we learned from the time we're infants, we learn how to read our parents' tone. We
Yeah.
don't know
Yeah.
what they're saying. We
Right.
have
Right.
no clue of the words, but we know the tone. And
Mm.
so we never really separate our ability to separate the tone and the words, because we know that what that tone means, because the words can be in conflict with the tone. So if
Yeah.
you put those in alignment, you get a lot more powerful message coming forward.
I really like that. I know in my latest book I tell the story of how I was at the officer deck on the submarine, and we had a lot of maintenance to get done that night. And I had one of the other officers was he kept delaying it because he had some other things he had to get done, and I had the pressure of I had to get all this stuff done before the end of the mid watch because we had a lot of drills happening in the morning, and I was under stress. And he kept. It seemed like he was taking his time doing his project, which was preventing me from doing my maintenance. And I completely lost it. And I talk about it in the book how I called him every name in the book, and I created some new names, but it just it wasn't a good. And what I didn't do is I went completely small brain reacting to because I was under the pressure,
Right.
in the moment. And what you're saying is there's a neutral place that you need to get to, and there's a neutral word and it's the way you think about it and say it. And if I just imagine myself saying, okay, or So this is the way
Because
it's going to be,
it's-
and sort of accepting it, and getting that chance to pause and let your big brain actually answer or respond to it.
yeah, and it's funny. The book's called Big Brain, Little Brain, and I know half the book really well, by the way, just so you don't feel alone there. But it really comes down to not only using the right tone, but if you can use your neutral word,
Mm.
it's a mnemonic thing. It sends a signal to your big brain to take over, right?
Yeah,
You say okay, right? So
yeah,
if you train yourself, and if you athletes train 90% of the time,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Even on a ship, you guys train. All you do is train for that one moment when you've got to react exactly
yeah, yeah,
perfectly, right? So you got to train your brain. You got to do this verbal training, the verbal muscle memory training.
yep,
So practice your neutral words, practice your neutral phrases. Maybe
yeah,
it's a phrase, and it doesn't have to be just a word. And you practice it in the right tone of voice, because then it's just instinct. When
yeah,
something
yeah,
goes wrong, somebody cuts you off, somebody is at a baseball game and they're screaming obscenities because they don't like the uniform you're wearing or the hat you're wearing. Sports activities is pretty ripe for little brain activity.
yeah, yeah.
Add alcohol to that, and you get another
That's
formula,
it.
right? And so, but you end up if you have that neutral word, and it's not just fight or flight. There is a neutral. And
Yeah.
Viktor Frankl, I highlight him in the book. He's a tremendous neuropsychologist from the 40s. He said, between stimulus and response, there's a space. And that space is where we make our choices, and that's our freedom and our future. And it's just such a brilliant thing. And that I got to tell you, it's the same thing. We have a choice. And that's why I try not to use the word triggered anywhere, because I don't want people to think that they don't have control anymore.
Mm,
They
mm.
do have control, because neutral is like an instant awareness
Yeah,
of,
yeah.
of the moment you're in. And now you have to pivot. And if you don't know exactly what to say, that's okay, because there's a chapter in the book on words, and we talk about um, time parachutes, right? Phrases that you can use when you're under pressure and you don't know what to say. Aside like that, it's like, I got to give that some thought before I respond. Or,
Yeah.
oh, that's interesting. Let me ponder that. But the idea is have these phrases ready and made
So,
natural to you. I mean, there's some in the book, but you can make them natural to yourself. Make them so natural and practice them, because they're part of that neutral where you'll be able to escape, and take a parachute away from a horrible situation so you don't say anything wrong. And
I really like that, especially, in you lead your business, you're a leader. People are looking. I always say that as a leader, you're on stage, right? Everyone's eyes are on you, and how you respond and react to the day's events. The organization tends to be that way too. So if you're frustrated, or if you're upset, or you're losing your cool all the time, because of the events of the day, your employees are going to be that way too. So you're, as a leader, you're setting the stage. So, the more, so let's talk a little bit about that. The more you use your big brain, right, as a leader, what does it do with your team? How does that impact your team?
it's, leadership is trust.
Hmm.
If they don't trust you, you're not leading. You can have the quote authority and the title, but you're not leading if you don't
Hmm.
have trust. Trust is everything. I don't care what level of business you're in. If everything comes down to trust, because people have got to trust you. And it's you are the culture of the company as a leader. Who you are is the culture of the company, and how you respond and treat people, that's the culture of the company. No matter how big it really gets, everybody knows, everybody hears everything.
Right.
There's no such thing as secrets anymore,
No.
right? There's no
No.
such thing. And we have this thing called the internet, which is fascinating because it lets you and I talk right here, but it's also something that lets people, it can be a little brain enabler if we're not
It
careful.
is. Yeah.
So
Big time. Yeah.
big time. And so and we'll talk about something else in a minute, but One of the things that I think that we developed, and I'm going to give Patty, who's been with me for 30 years, a lot of credit for this because we went back and forth. Is we have two team members, phenomenal manager, phenomenal chef, really good people, but all of a sudden they weren't talking to each other, and they didn't like each other, and all of a sudden it was starting to affect the team. It was affecting the entire culture. We couldn't understand. We sat them down. Is there any problem? No. They went nothing. So Patty and we said, okay, what is it? I don't know. I said, well, let's try something else. And so I said, we called the manager and we said, okay, you have a meeting tomorrow, because Patty and I had talked this out ahead of time. All right. What are the three things that she does extremely well, this chef? Well, I can think of three things she doesn't do well. I said, I get that. Okay. A little brain comment. I let it go. Right. But what is she? Well, fine. She's always on time. Her uniform is impeccable. She's really fast at her job. I said, okay, that's all I need right now. Tomorrow, when you have the meeting, she's not going to be there because she's on vacation. But she's taking a vacation day. I want you to finish the meeting after you've gone through all the numbers and matrix. I want you to finish the meeting with those three things that she does really well. Saying, oh yeah, she's not here right now, but she does this, and this well. And I just really appreciate the fact that she does her job so well. And end the meeting right there. No other discussion. Don't add, just do that. 24 hours later, she walks in the door. She's in there working, and she gets there earlier. He walks in the door the next day after the meeting, and he hears, Robert, how are you? I'm fine. How are you? I'm doing great. Hey, I just want to show you a couple things. And all of a sudden, whatever had been negative between them had been erased because she had heard in 24 hours that he had said something really nice about her when she wasn't there. And this was a fascinating discussion and discovery, because what it discovered is that the rest of the team members were caught on and really began to trust this manager more, because they know there was angst between them. And yet he didn't take advantage of that she wasn't there and dissed her. Instead, he said something nice about her, which to her signaled respect.
Yeah.
And it just changed without having to say it, because if you have to say it, it's not necessarily the same thing, but it was sincere, because it was three things she really does do well. And what it taught us is that gossip, which is a normal cancer to any culture,
right,
or company, can be turned into an advantage if it's good gossip.
Yeah.
It's all of a sudden you can strategically use a good gossip because you're motivating somebody who's not there.
Yeah.
You're also sending a signal to the team that they can trust you.
Yes. Yeah. No, I like that a lot. I think, like you said, it's really important that you do build trust and with your employees, but how you communicate with employees, and that that you're supporting. So, like when you have those bosses that talk about their employees, other employees behind their backs, right? Like I had a boss who used to do that. You call in your room, he's like, you call him in, he call you in his office and say, what do you think about Jim over there? Like my colleague. I'm like, well, he's a great guy. He's like, well, do you think he really knows, how to run his division? And I'm like, what is going on here? I mean, that's not a good situation when you're in there, because I'm thinking to myself is that when I'm not around, he's got my colleagues in there asking about me, so this is not a good situation. And again, it broke down trust, because I thought, well, why is he asking these questions? And what's happening when I'm not around, So
well, that's a great surmise too, because it's the beginning of distrust.
It is.
And it doesn't help the culture. This is why the leader is the culture. The leader is the culture. The leader is the one that is planting these seeds on a daily basis and either nurturing them, pulling weeds where you need to. But it really comes down to you are the gardener of that division or whoever it is, and you're taking care of this stuff. But everybody is listening to everything you're saying. And in today's world, everybody hears everything.
Everybody hears everything, and everything is on the internet. Eventually, it seems like so.
And if we have partial information, we fill in the
We
details,
do,
right?
yeah,
Which
we
is not
do.
always good because we can assume the negative component versus the positive component,
Yeah.
so we have to be cautious with that.
Yeah, the one thing I'm thinking as you're talking through this is we're very humans are very tribal, right? And our little brain is trying to protect us, right? From this is this person in my tribe or not? This is the enemy, or is my ally, right? And part of moving to the big brain is to say that this isn't your enemy. This is your coworker, right? And I know what in my new book, I talk a lot about one thing we did really well on submarines is we reminded everybody that the enemy was outside the hull. It wasn't inside the hull, right? So your enemy was, in our case, I was a Cold War sailor, the Soviets, and all the sea pressure that was trying to get in. And so we constantly reminded each other that the problem wasn't inside the boat. The problem was outside the boat. And I think when I worked in corporate America, it seemed like the problem was inside the company, right? There was a lot of infighting and kingdom building and manipulation that happened. And so you saw a lot of small brain communication because everybody was being really tribal and fighting for their little piece of the pie. And so I think when you're the leader and you're using big brain communication, as you phrase it, if you're taking that time and you're pausing and you're building trust over time, then people start letting go of their tribes and letting go of their, the internal conflict. And they say, well, wait a second, let's direct our energy towards the real enemies of the business, which is our competition or what have you, versus, inside the business. I think that's a really important thing I see just in talking through this and thinking about it.
Well, it's absolutely key what you just said, because it's true that in a corporate culture, it's so easy for things to go sideways. And if you're in charge of the corporate culture, and that's the one thing leadership is always, you can't point fingers because they're all pointing at you. Right. So so in leadership, when your boss bringing you in and pointing out to somebody else, he's just breaking down trust. And I think that the critical part is, we all go through the day sometimes with these phantom arguments in our head. Well, if this happens, I'm going to say that.
Yes.
If this happens, I'm going to do that. So, and we have these because we it's like a frustration we want to get rid of. So we've already played out the argument in our head and we won, right, in our head. So lots of times the people get into these situations where in a corporate culture where you just hear a bit of a rumor and then you start assuming, well, what does that mean? What does that mean? And it turns into something that only a leader can erase. Yeah. Only a leader can wipe it out, but with constant, really good communication. And that's where the leadership comes into, because, I think one of the keys to the big brain, little brain is that there is no getting back at anybody. There's no, a lot of people say, well, I'm going to wait. As soon as I say this, then I'll be fine. As soon as I get back at this person, I'll make this comment, and then I'll be settled. Realizing that all you're doing is creating a ripple effect that's going to come back at you.
Yeah.
Because there's a ripple effect to every moment, every conversation,
yes,
good or bad. And so you can either create a good ripple effect or a bad ripple effect. And as you go through this stuff, and especially, you can watch other people creating these different ripple effects. Our job as leaders is to sort of manage those people and see if we can't guide them. Can't always immediately turn them, you can guide them. And I think that the phrase in the Navy is, you can't turn a ship very quickly,
right?
And you can't turn a culture very quickly.
No.
You know that. And so it takes precision and timing and a lot of effort to make sure that everything is operating properly.
Yeah.
People are almost always in big brain unless something happens, right? And when something happens, that's where we have to take over. And if we do so, listen, as leaders, we can say the wrong thing. We can goof up and we can say something. And the only thing I say, a quick apology, you know what? I shouldn't have said it like that. And also, there's no expiration date.
Yeah.
Ever 3 weeks ago, we were in that meeting. I don't think I should have said it like that. So, but yeah, please forgive me for that. Just those little things go miles
You're
because
building trust when you do that. You're acknowledging where you came up short. So you're holding a high standard to the team. And when you violate that standard, you have to admit it. You have to say, well, I wasn't correct here. Yeah.
Because it doesn't go away in their minds. They know.
Right.
And so
right.
the only way we erase it is by having that apology. And listen, I feel grateful that we've been able to do all this stuff. And I think that, one of the best examples of Big Brain, Little Brain is a movie called Groundhog Day.
One of my favorites.
Yeah, one of my favorites. But it is exactly Big Brain, Little Brain. And if you notice that the movie is about a weatherman, right, who says the storm's not coming in, right, but he doesn't want to go to this little town of Puxatawny, and he's there. All he wants to do is leave, and he can't leave because the weather system he predicted wasn't coming in came in, and so the weather system doesn't let him leave. And so he has to repeat that day over and over and over again. And he is a snarky, rude, sarcastic person all the way through. And until the very end, finally he goes through a day where he's nice to everybody and everything's better. And he wants the girl, and he finally gets the girl when he is sincerely, genuinely treating everybody right. So, I mean, the metaphor there is that we all create our own weather systems, And so if you want clear weather, clearly communicate. And if you want, I guess in your case, rough seas, if you want clear weather, communicate clearly.
Yeah, that's great. I love it. And for our listeners, if you haven't watched Groundhog Day, watch that movie. It's a great analogy, and it's a great movie. So this has been great. I really appreciate everything you've shared with us. How can people find out more about this new book and your company and what have you?
Well, bigbrainlittlebrain.com is the website. And I've got a couple of sheets there, worksheets that you can utilize. We talked about activators, and there's an activator worksheet people can just download for free. So they can highlight the activators in their own life, things that bother them, that annoy them. And there's also one on neutral.
Okay.
Where they can write down their neutral phrase or neutral word in this little bubble that we put there, so they can practice it. So, the idea is get as many people as we can into neutral, but before they, let Little Brain take over. And I feel so grateful that I've been able to share this with your audience. Thank you so much.
No, John, thank you.
I do appreciate it.
I need a neutral word. So I'm really, that part about it is something I really like, to be able to just have that moment to diffuse and respond correctly versus reacting to the stimulus that's hitting me. So I think that's a big takeaway for me, is finding that neutral word that I can train on, and I can have that muscle memory, so that I just I might be that guy when somebody cuts me off that I get angry. So I need to stop that.
I think we've all been there, and we all have a big brain, we all have a little brain, and we all have a choice.
Yes. No, that's fantastic. Well, this has been great. I'll put links to all these resources in the show notes so people can get to it. And I really encourage everyone to pick up this book. It's called Big Brain, Little Brain: How to Control Which One Speaks for You. And we've learned that if the little brain is speaking for you, things don't work out really too well. So you got to get that big brain talking. And this has been really, really helpful. So thank you, Kevin, for all of your wisdom and insight today.
John, I appreciate the time. I really appreciate the conversation. This has been enlightening for me as well.
I've enjoyed it. It's been really good. So thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Well, that's it for today. Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is John Rennie saying take care and lead well.